All right, hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jackie Schaefer and I am Rice Architecture's career and alumni specialist at the school. Normally I'm helping you get jobs and summer internships, but before I did this position, I was actually a BIM instructor, a BIM educator, and a trainer for corporate and student clients who were using Revit. And the AGSA has asked me to put together just a few intro tutorials for you to help you figure it out. So the first place we're going to go, unfortunately, is going to be a little presentation that I put together. So let's see if I can get that going. Right here. All right, so Revit is a BIM program. I know that's probably super obvious. But BIM means building information modeling. And what this means is that the pieces in a model have unique information associated with them, okay? This information can be about pricing, it can be about specific material. There's a lot of different information that can be associated with pieces. And it does things like allows for takeoffs and quick estimates on pricing, and that's why it became really popular. It gave really quick pricing feedback. There is some improved coordination from traditional drawings because everything's linked together. That's not really exciting news anymore, but it was at the time when BIM was first introduced. It creates the opportunity for faster corrections and drawing sets. And there's no need to export your 2D drawings and then work on them. It's all native to the file. So I wanted to talk about the differences between Revit and Rhino. I am not a big user of Rhino. I didn't use it a whole lot when I was in school, but I had the students who took my BIM class use Rhino as their preliminary design tool, along with other things, whatever they wanted. And here's what I do know. So Rhino is really great for, it used to be called NURBS modeling. I don't know if it still is, but complex fluid geometries, right? There is a high level of geometric accuracy, right? So if you want things to look a specific way, it's very easy to get them to look that specific way in Rhino. Whereas Revit is more of a database of information. It's great for things like sort of, I like to say that where Revit really shines is from about SD through CA. So it's a lot more about sort of the design production process, as it's less fluid than Rhino. Rhino is great for sort of massing studies and conceptual design where things are rapidly changing and it's really geometrically based. Revit's really great for the sort of nuts and bolts and details of a project. So within the Revit project, there is a 3D model, there are sheet files, and all your drawings are contained in there. The thing to know about Revit is that Revit requires specific information much earlier on in the process, okay? So the way that I would think about that is, in Rhino, you can kind of just say, well, there's kind of a stair and it's sort of this. With Revit, it's kind of asking you like, well, what makes up the rise and what makes up the run? What makes the railing? Is it a baluster railing? Is it a panel railing? I need to know this information before I can make your railing. And former students of mine would laugh because they know that I tend to anthropomorphize these programs a lot and say, this is what it wants or this is what it needs, but you're just gonna have to bear with me. The way that I like to think of it is that Rhino is a lot like Play-Doh and Revit is a lot like Lego, right? So Play-Doh, obviously you can do kind of whatever you want with it. Revit has a lot more rigid expectations for use. Okay, so to start kind of giving you an idea of how the files are made up, there is a main project file. And when you work in an office, that's going to be the thing that you open up every day. It uses the file extension RVT, the Revit file for the project. There is one usually. Sometimes in a multi-use project, each building might have its own RVT file, or if you had a building with a garage, the garage might have its own RVT file, and those two things might be linked together into a third file. But generally speaking, a building usually has one Revit file. There are a lot of different ways for BIM managers to sort of work these things. So you'll have to be a little flexible, but generally speaking, project files contain many elements that are created directly within the RVT file, right? There's lots of elements in there, but you can also use sort of what Revit calls families. They're kind of similar to Rhino blocks. And so families are the elements that make up things in the model. It'll all make sense in a little bit, I think. Revit families use the extension RFA. So you can download Revit families from, well, I think Autodesk has just a ton in their library that's native. You can download them directly from the manufacturer. There are lots of places to get Revit families, and there are plenty of Revit families that are created in the office that you're working at that they've used for multiple projects, whether it's a specific type of detail or something that they use over and over again. So you'll see these RFAs everywhere, and they live inside the RVT file. Within the RVT file, the main project file, there's also a section where you see saved views, and those views are how you see things 2- and 3-dimensionally within the program. You can place those specific views on a sheet. They're called sheets. And you can print that out and it makes a sheet for you. Okay, so views are a thing that you can change the literal view constraints, similar to how you cut sections in Rhino, and you can change how far back they go, how wide the sort of boundaries are of that section, for instance, or plan. That's kind of similar to a view, that slice, where that slice is being taken in your project. And then you place those on a sheet, and your sheet is sort of your print file. So I will go into these functions more later. But just to review before we get started, Revit files are VTs. Within the Revit RVT file, there are many families called RFAs. There are sheets, there are views. You can create new views to make sections or details or plan details, and you can alter their properties to look like a proper architectural drawing. So the difference being here that all of the things that you would traditionally do with a Rhino drawing in Illustrator, Photoshop, Illustrator, you do native in Revit. So all of those pieces are in one place. Things that you should know about the Revit workflow when you start in an office, okay? You'll be opening and closing views frequently. Most of the time when I see people working on Rhino, I'm seeing them primarily work in a 3D view, and they're spinning it and they're kind of going into it in different places. With Revit, you use more traditional 2D views to move around the building, and you use 3D views for context. Not always, but generally. So you will spend less time in 3D views. You can cut 3D sections of the model to get a better understanding of how something's working. But to get the specificity, you need to move things specific amounts. It's much, much easier, and it makes a lot more sense to do in 2D with this program. There are 2-letter input hotkeys that will make your workflow much quicker. You don't have to hit enter or space. You don't have to memorize a whole lot of commands. They're almost, and I say this all the time, but they're almost like whatever you would guess that they would be. The wall tool is WA, the door tool is DR. And as soon as you type those 2 letters, it enters that command. To exit commands, you hit escape once, twice, sometimes, it depends. So you'll be hitting 2-letter keys and hitting escape a lot. Important note, your coworkers are in the file with you at the same time. So everybody's working cohesively within one file. And this is where, unfortunately, I wish that something existed like this for Rhino, because it would be great for you guys in studio when you're working cohesively together. You can work in the same file, and not to get too detailed into it, but basically what happens is you have ownership of certain elements. And so if you touch a wall, the other person in the file can no longer edit that wall until you save the file and it relinquishes your ownership of those. And so it's funny, back in the early days of Revit, we used to have to manually relinquish all of our ownership of elements. And so you'd hear people going, you need to relinquish, which I don't know, it was just funny to hear in the office. Relinquish. All right. I think that's all I have in this presentation. That's pretty exciting. So those are the kind of main, let me stop my share here. Those are kind of the main things to know about just the intro. And so now we're gonna look at, let me get my Revit open. So now we're gonna look at what Revit looks like. So I just downloaded, I believe this is Revit 2022 now. the student version or the educational version, which gives you pretty much all of the same stuff that you would normally get. Now, normally speaking, what you would do is you would go up to this button here that says open, and you would navigate to wherever your project manager said, hey, this is where our file is. They'll normally tell you, or they'll help you open it the first time, right? Just like anything else. But we're going to open this sample architecture project. And the first thing that you're going to see is, I feel like when people who are used to using Rhino look at Revit for the first time, they're like, this looks so stupid. So I'm going to try to walk you through the logic of it, right? So I remember when it went to a ribbon interface like it is up here. So your ribbon has a lot of different tabs, and all of your, we're going to just ignore everything down here for a minute. All of your commands are going to be up here. Your architecture commands are your building commands. Your structure, steel, precast systems, these things are generally used for structural systems. They're generally not things that they'll have you working on. Insert is where you can link CAD underlays if you have existing drawings that you're trying to utilize, or you've exported things from Rhino and you're trying to build off of them. This is also where you can import families. So if you don't like your family, you can load an entire new family right here in the Insert tab. Sorry guys, these are the jokes. We have annotations here, and annotations are things that you would use on traditional architecture drawings, but things like dimensions are really great for when you move items. You can utilize a dimension to input the exact distance that you want something to be. Detail lines are two-dimensional. Most of the things on here are two-dimensional for annotation. We have analyze, which is of course for more structural analysis and climate analysis. We have massing. So masses are sort of the Rhino type geometric modeling component. It's a place where you can create site elements like the ground that you see in this drawing below. You can create the building pads. Most of the time, when you're a summer intern or a new employee, these things will already be in the model for you. So these are things to kind of learn as like a secondary step. Collaborate is where you go when you're dealing with your other coworkers. And so work sets are sort of like layers. There are no really traditional layers in Revit. So this allows people to all work together. There's a work sharing monitor that your BIM manager will use to see what everybody's doing and make sure that they're doing the right things. But you have the ability to, again, synchronize and relinquish. And all of these things would pop up if this was a work shared file, which it's not because it's just a local basic file as a sample. But these are where the primary sort of co-worker tools are. We have view. So this talks about whatever view is on your screen and active at the time. Manage allows us to look at material libraries and links and things like that. Generally speaking, you won't have to do too much of that in the very beginning. We have add-ins, different companies use different add-ins. And then we have modify, and this is sort of the pop-up changeable menu that you get when you select an item. On the left, we have the properties pane. So the first half of this lower area, that's the properties pane. Depending on what it is that you have selected, different properties will pop up. So anytime you need to change something that you've selected, most of your information will be found in the properties pane. And just below, we have all the views. And so if you scroll down all the way into the views, you'll also see all the sheets. And you can see that bolded here as our A001 title sheet, which is what's open right now. So whatever is open is going to be bolded in this list. You can see here that they've got several floor plans, 3D views, elevations. It's funny, this project hasn't changed since, I feel like, since they launched the program. I feel like I know this house better than I know my own house. If I double click, that view, that whatever view I double clicked will pop up, and I'll be able to see all the elements in that view. And you'll notice too that it is now bold. And if I scroll back down, my sheet is no longer bold. It's still back here. It's a tab. It's back in the back. And so I can quickly move around to all of these views. If I wanted to take a look at this section, for instance, this 1A104 section, I don't know if it's the building section, the longitudinal section, or the stair section. I do know that, but let's say that I didn't, because you'll have 400 sections. You can also click on the section heads. They're like hyperlinks, and they will take you to your section. That's pretty exciting. anytime you see something blue, you can go and follow the magic trail to whatever drawing that is. You'll notice that I have multiple sheets open. It is possible for me to close all my active views or close inactive views right here. And so that'll close everything but the drawing that I'm on. That was a tip from somebody on Instagram. They're like, please make sure that the first thing you show them is that. So when they have all of these tabs stacked up, they know quickly to go to view and close inactive views. All right, so this project is very simple. And I'm not going to go too far into the specifics because this is just sort of a UI overview. But what I want to show you is that when I select an item, so we're going to zoom in and I'm going to pick this wall. So you'll notice that when I mouse over a wall, it turns blue, and it also pops up with the title of what this is. So which specific family it is. It's under the wall category. It's a basic wall, and it's called wall timberclad. Really original. If I click on that, you'll notice that my properties panel over here on the left has changed, right? So now it says basic wall timberclad. Now I could change this wall type and go through here and pick a different wall type if I wanted to from this pull down menu. All my wall types are there. But I also have information here about my wall. And I'll go into the modeling of this later, but essentially it shows that it starts on level 1 and it goes up to level ceiling. So they have a whole separate level for ceiling. And we know this if we look at one of these sections or elevations. You can see that, right? Here's level 1, here's level ceiling. So that wall goes up and stops at the ceiling. Okay. I can see that this is a room bounding wall. We can get into that later. There is a length to this wall. There is an area to this wall. There is a volume to this wall. So this is where some of the BIM stuff starts to come into play. Now, without going too far into things, if I wanted to move or change this wall, I could do it that way, right? I could go and scroll down here and find the correct wall. If they say, hey, all of our A3 walls need to be A4 walls, you could go through and you could find all the A3 walls. You could change them all to A4 walls. And you can do that, for instance, by right-clicking on them and selecting all instances. There's all sorts of fun things when you right-click on these elements here. But maybe I need to just change all the A3 walls slightly. And so I would do that by going into edit type. And so some elements, doors are like this, walls are like this. Here's a door. It just shows you what level it starts at, for instance. And what mark it is, the mark is what number it is. So for those of you who have never had a job in architecture, all walls have a type, all doors have a type and a number. They're specified on a schedule. Real fascinating stuff. But you can hit edit type here. So you'll see that that came up as well here. And these edit type menus have all sorts of information in them further to the wall family or the door family or whatever. When you change the properties right here in the main properties panel, it changes this instance of the wall. But if you click edit type, it's going to change every instance of this specific type. Right? And so then you get a ton of different properties in here. Generally speaking, it is good practice if you're going to edit a wall and you need to make it a new type to say edit type and then duplicate and make your changes. Duplicating obviously makes a copy of the same wall with the same settings and allows you to alter it so that you can always go back and find your previous type. So I might call this wall timberclad 2 because I'm super creative with my naming. And you'll see that I have the ability to change the structure. This is actually the layers of the wall. How it wraps, which just means how it meets different other walls, right? And here you've got the graphics for how it shows up on a drawing, right? And then there's all sorts of other information that you can put in here. And in the structure, you even have the materials. So these would be your render materials, the thicknesses of those. So it looks like these are all in metric. So for most of you guys, it will be inches. And when I go into further detail about how all that works, I probably will change the units to imperial units because the input for those things is different. All right, there are all sorts of different types of items in here, most of which you can find in your architecture panel. Things like rooms. So a room is not a modeled physical element, but it kind of is in some ways, for instance. It's measuring the volume of the space. You have to tell it what the boundaries are. And there, I mean, I could go into detail on this. I have some videos on my YouTube channel about all of these things. They're from 2015. They're from the last time I taught the Revit class for Rice, but the principle is still the same. The way that they work is absolutely still the same. Okay, so there's a lot to dig into here, obviously. But generally speaking, when you start in an office, this is the kind of thing that you'll see, and you might be picking up red lines, or they might have you, I don't know, adding walls or drawing or whatever. And so you'll want to work, obviously, in whatever view you're supposed to be working in, but you can also, some places have, these are obviously sheet views. Like if you look at this, this is clearly on a page, and I'm sure if we go down and we look in the sheets here, that we have it under the A102 plants, right? So here it is dropped onto a sheet with a tag. But maybe I don't want to work in this fancy view with all these tags everywhere and it's driving me crazy. I can always right click on these and I can duplicate my view. So do a lot of right clicking just to kind of mess around with things. I absolutely suggest that you get in here and you mess with this and don't save it and move things around and see what happens. Change the properties of stuff and see what happens. There's all sorts to get into. The other thing is up here at the very top, there are pretty typical Windows program buttons. The one that I really like is the little housey house up here. It's the default 3D view, and that'll show you the standard 3D view for the project. You can cut more 3D views if you want. So you can place a camera and do a perspective view, or you can make another default 3D view if you'd like, by just duplicating this. See, here it is down here. So you could duplicate it and change the parameters of it. It has its own series of properties, right? So every time you open something, even though I have nothing selected in this window, it's giving me the properties for the view that's open. So it's kind of always giving you something. Now, moving around in 3D in Revit is a little weird. So you need a 3-button mouse with a scroll wheel, and you hold the shift key down and you hold the mouse button down, and that'll allow you to move around. Now you could use this little navigation cube that they have up here on the top right. I hate it, it's up to you. You can zoom in and out by scrolling the zoom button. And I think you can pan just by pressing, yeah, you can pan just by pressing the scroll wheel down. Sorry guys, it's been a while since I've been in Revit for anything particularly serious. So that's kind of how you can move around. And so you can see that I can still like select these things and look at them, right? And I could change the section box on this so that it's viewable. It's not viewable right now, to cut this in a different way. So I could do that as well. We'll get into more of that stuff later. Something that's important to know is, I mean, there are a lot of important things to know about this program, obviously, but big mistakes that I see from students that are working brand new into a project with some other people on a team is that there are multiple ways to hide things in a view. So if something's in your way, like for instance, this room is in your way and you keep trying to, I don't know, click something, click the floor, click this door, and you keep getting the room, there are multiple ways to hide things. So I can right click on this and it says hide in view element, and that will permanently hide it in this view. The other thing I can do is I can click on it and type HH, and that's a temporary hide. And you know that it's a temporary hide because this little teal box pops up. It's like something's being hidden. And then if I hit HR, it resets the hide and it brings everything back. So this is really great even when you're in 3D views. If I was like, oh, I really wish this roof was out of my way, I can HH it. And this exterior wall, I can HH it. And then I can sort of zoom around and be like, what does this look like again? It's kind of weird that the bathtub and the toilet are so separated. Oh, I guess it's 2 separate bathrooms, isn't it? I really should know this better than my own house at this point. So you can continue to hide as many things as you want. You'll notice that the windows still stay here when the wall's gone. You'll notice that the doors are still there when the wall's gone. And I can hit HR to reset everything. All right, I'm trying to think of what else I would want to show you just in a quick intro. I have some notes, but I've gone through them pretty quickly. So I think probably I'll stop there just to keep it kind of short. But that's just kind of how the UI works. That's a little bit about how to get around it. And we will move on to other things in the next video, I guess. Hope that's been helpful. I'm sure you're sitting here going, what? It can be very overwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming the first time you learn anything new, right? So what I want you to know is that this is definitely like any other program, something that every time you use it, you learn new things about it. No one's going to expect you to come into an office and have 100% fluency in this program, especially if you're a summer intern. I mean, everyone's office does things differently. So just trying to familiarize yourself with even just how to get in here and do a temporary HR will help you to sort of get used to how you move and navigate. And then as we move forward and we learn more commands, you know, you'll feel more and more comfortable. So for now, just follow what I did, check it out, look inside, and don't be too hard on yourself or have too high of expectations of yourself because there's a lot to go through. All right, well, hope this has been helpful and I'll see you in the next one.